Hey, what's going on? Dr. Mike here, VIP Fitness. This little video is going to be like 9 steps I have, and these are just my 9 steps. I'm sure there's other great ones out there for technique breakdown for the traditional deadlift. So if you don't know what I mean, traditional deadlift, which I'm sure everybody knows, but traditional deadlift is your feet are going to be in closer and your hands are going to be outside your legs, and you're going to stand up with a weight, essentially. So let me just go through my setup, kind of my ritual I do. First of all, I actually deadlift typically, especially if I'm doing my heavier lifts, I use wrestling shoes. I never was a wrestler, but at the time when I started lifting, I was born in 1981. I don't even think there was lifting shoes, but where would you get them? This was before the internet and all that stuff. So when I started lifting weights, I don't think there was no internet, but there were people that wrestled, and I remember a buddy telling me who was a good deadlifter said, get wrestling shoes. Once you put those on and they grip that rubber flooring like I'm standing on, there's no going back. And to this day, they get credit for it. I won't use their name. So anyway, I prefer that. However, there's a lot of flat shoes, different things that are great. Or you can go, I wouldn't recommend barefoot in a gym, but you can go shoeless. I still don't really recommend this because there's less traction and grip you get on the floor, which is going to make you have less force production for strength. But at the end of the day, what you don't want to do is have like high heel shoes on, because if you do have high heel shoes, think about it. Let's just do real extreme. Let's say I have 4-inch high heels on, all right, to drill home a point. That's going to put me somewhere north of this, all right? Now I go to pick up, if I'm here and I go to pick up the bar, what's going to happen is it's going to throw me forward. So the idea is barefoot, flats ideally, or wrestling shoes, then barefoot or socks. If your foot's flat, it helps me stay lower and anchored to the ground, okay? And then now that's tip 1. All right, so tip 2 is you want to make sure you stand approximately shoulder width apart or hips width apart. To be honest with you, whatever you're comfortable with. I have a big pelvis and big hips and stuff like that. So typically your bigger hip people, whether they're tall or short, they're not going to do the narrow stance. But then again, you could find 500 people in the state and prove me wrong. In general, I stand about this wide. I have a wider stance than most people. A lot of taller guys I know, they stand more narrow, and there's all these different reasons for it. But what I'm recommending is you pick a stance that you feel that you're your most powerful to go down and up, okay? So that's what I recommend. Or you don't fall on your butt when you go to deadlift. Another thing, when you go, let's start here. I'm gonna come this way. This angle is probably better visual than this direct side. So when I approach the bar, I just get the bar as close as possible, okay? Some people will do this and come back, and I might be one of those people sometimes, especially when I get psyched up. I like to be very emotional before I lift heavy. I don't just go like this and then pick it up. I get fired up, kind of go like nuts, ape shit. Basically, that's what gets me going. But ultimately, you're gonna get this bar. I like doing also an overhand grip. I used to do under-over, which allows me to do a lot more weight, okay? And I don't even use wraps, but for the beginner, I wouldn't recommend wraps anyway, because you wanna be able to practice holding the bar. But let's just say the benefit of double overhand is because I'm loading the body symmetrical. So let's say I do under-over, my right hand's under, left hand's over. When I stand up, whatever side's in the supinated position or underhand, I'm gonna rotate towards. I'm not saying you're gonna actually see somebody do that, but what's gonna happen is the bar is gonna naturally be anchored closer to this side of the body. As you pull, you're gonna have more driving force that way, which is gonna create a big muscular imbalance. However, if you prefer that way, which competitive lifters are going to, okay, or maybe you just want to lift more weight, you're going to do this way, just switch sides. So if you're doing 4x4s, maybe set 1 this way, set 2, okay, some common sense stuff. And then there's other types of grips that are crazy I never practiced, so I'm not going to talk about, but I like the double overhand. But however, you can't do as much, but I believe it's safer overall, especially for muscle imbalances. Okay, so we covered that. Before I get to pick this thing up, so many steps. One thing I want you to remember, whether you're deadlifting or squatting, is you always want to make sure, or really anything, pressing overhead, you always want to make sure your heel, pinky toe, and big toe maintain contact on the floor, so that way your center of mass isn't shifting left, right, and sideways. And if you learn to keep your center of mass nice and centered in, you'll have more driving force through the floor when you stand up. All right. So let's do this. Let me check my notes here. Okay. So the thing is, there's 2 steps to a deadlift, essentially. Well, one is you want to keep a neutral spine, all right? So I want to keep my chest up, hips back. I don't want to be flexed. I don't want to be extended. I just want to be nice and tall here. That's going to equal the load throughout the spine, less likely to hurt my back. Anyone who hurts their back deadlifting, every time I've seen it happen, if I've seen it live, it's always because they're rounding their back too much. Now, keep in mind, when you do a traditional deadlift, especially if you're a taller person with not as long limbs, or maybe just short arms and tall, or short arms in general, you're more prone to round the back. So that's why one of my tips, I'm going to say, keep your chest up. So basically what we're going to do is you're going to grab this bar. I go pinky on ring. I go a little wider. All right, notice how my footing is pretty wide. I'll roll the bar in, all right? So I'm going to have heel, pinky toe, and big toe here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the slack by lifting my chest, okay? So wherever that is, you're going to do that. Now, the thing is, if I get more narrow here, I'm going to be more upright. Because I go a wider grip with my hands and feet, it keeps me lower to the ground, and yes, I have a further pulling distance, but I'm okay with that. I feel good that way. So you gotta go by how you feel ultimately, okay? One thing I want to say, I totally forgot. It sucks. Pinky on the floor, reaching bar somewhere, CDO. Oh yeah, so the deadlift is a neutral spine at all times, and then if you think about it from here, it's a leg press. Once my hands get to my knees, it's a hinge. So it's a 2-part movement. Don't squat your deadlift is basically what I'm saying. Don't try to stay super upright and hips back. All it's going to do is pull you forward and then put you in position and just screws up your power and more risk of injury. So you got to remember, when you deadlift, it's leg press, hinge, down. Leg press, hinge. So if you see that leg press back there, I just visualize that I'm holding this bar and I'm pressing through the floor, leg pressing, and then I bring my pelvis forward and my hands are pushing back. All right, so let me just run through a whole sequence because that was a gazillion steps. I get this bar, pinky on ring, feet comfortable position, heel, pinky, big toe, grip the bar like literally I'm gonna snap it in half, pulling it in me, chest up, drive, leg press, hinge. And I do the same opposite order on the way down. I hip hinge back and fall into the movement. So I'm going to do it again, one more time. Grab the bar, got my stance, chest up, taking up the slack, kind of keeping those knees out, and I just drive through the floor, hinge. Notice how when I come up, I'm pulling straight up, I'm not going like this. We don't want to extend at the top. One last thing, and then we'll break into groups here, is when you get down here, this is where that rounding naturally occurs, right? So a lot of us will just pull from that position. What you want to think is, really think, keep chest up, and keep the chest up the whole time. If you're thinking, keep chest up the whole time, that keeps you in that neutral spine, so you're less likely to hurt your back, and you'll have more upright pulling power.